you kind of ask the question, is, cybersecurity business relevant, or, on what sort of a level should it be discussed? And I kind of want to ask the question back to you, like, and keep in mind, I'm the defender, right? But if I play the attacker here for a second, if I tell you that I can stop your revenue generating processes, okay, because you have some sort of, tech company, tech-enabled businesses, some sort of, SaaS company, anything of the sort, and I tell you I can stop those revenue generating processes, should you be discussing this sort of threat landscape on an exec level? Or would you say, no, we can probably defer that down in quotes, but to the IT department? No, I'm pretty sure, Markus, you want to be very much aware. I think that totally is the CISO's responsibility to articulate these threats in a way that everyone finds them tangible and present a clear roadmap on how to address all of that stuff, yeah?
Welcome to a new episode of the EO Media House podcast series on AI. Today we are diving headfirst in the mesmerizing world of AI and cybersecurity and its impact on our companies. We have a true visionary and trailblazer with us, Christian Matthies, the founding partner of the cybersecurity consultancy firm CISOCON. I'm also joined by my good friend and co-host, Dr. Markus Wuebben from EO Berlin. My name is Robert van der Zwart from EO Netherlands. Markus, Christian, welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hello.
Markus, you want to start with a little bit of a story on the Jiffy Klitschko thing, what happened in Berlin recently?
Well, yeah. So the thing was, I always had security on top of mind, right? I'm working with customer data in cross-engage. But last year, there was a new level where I thought that security is one of the number one things on top of my mind nowadays. And it was really funny. It was actually dangerous. But it sounds funny. So our mayor in Berlin, Ms. Giffey, was invited by Vladimir Klitschko for a video conference. And they accepted the video conference. Well, this last year was already, in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And since, he's basically the mayor of Kiev, he requested a chat with Giffey. And it turned out, and only after a few minutes, that it wasn't Vladimir Klitschko, but it was actually a deep fake. And a deep fake made it into the mayor's office, and they had a real chat. And only after a few minutes, they noticed, what is this guy talking about? This is kind of a strange agenda. This is strange what he's talking about. And then they found out that it was actually deep fake. And they called Kiev, and could that actually be that he's on there? And it turned out it was just a deep fake. And they thought things like these can actually influence politics, decision-making, entire communities. And that's why I thought this AI game is also, or has a big effect on security and secure business operation and politics. And that's why I thought, that we should, talk about this story in the first place to give it a bit of a frame where things are actually going.
Christian, of course, you probably have an opinion on this, but before we go into that, who are you and what are you doing?
Oh, what an interesting question. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me, first of all. Look, in a nutshell, my name is Chris. One of two founders of Berlin-based cybersecurity company CISOCON. Just to describe it in a nutshell, I mean, I've been doing sort of hacking and exploitation for the first part of my career, approximately 10 years. And then I think in 2017, we founded the company that today is CISOCON. And what we do there, and I run that with my partner, Eric, is we develop and operationally execute security programs. And because we, don't tell anybody, but because we feel it's kind of boring to do that for one company, we do it for a whole lot at the same time. And so keeps us up on our feet. That's me and that's us.
Or do I justify, if it's not paying enough justification for you, what you're doing?
I hope I'm ethical. I don't know. It's one of those words. People ask me that question. I never quite know what to say other than sure. Yeah.
Okay. What brought you to the security game?
Look, like I said, and I think many people kind of share that journey, especially today, and we can get into it more in depth later. But I started as a hacker, I guess you can say, in the world of hacking and exploitation. So I've been spending my time discovering vulnerabilities in, businesses, application stacks, hacking companies from the outside, very ethically, Robert, right? Not illegally, ethically. But then I think it was around about 2012 that I kind of switched side from what we call the offense side to the defense side, meaning taking the CISO's position and thinking more about what it takes to scale security in businesses, in tech companies in particular, and just operationalize it and protect companies from the inside. Turns out that's a whole lot more difficult than breaking into things. Again, we can go more in depth, but breaking into companies is a whole lot easier than protecting them. So yeah.
But you think like a hacker.
I do, but I also think like a defender. That's nowadays my job.
Well, you know what? So I'm changing my passwords regularly. Yeah, I'm actually checking my emails whether somebody wants to phish an email. And just actually half an hour ago, there was another kind of a phishing attack where an employee received an email that said that my co-founder Manuel wanted some certain things to be done and to get the WhatsApp message. And it was really seemed that it was my co-founder Manuel by the name. So for me, I'm doing everything that cybersecurity wants me to do. Or is cybersecurity more? What is cybersecurity? Where do we meet cybersecurity apart from, let's say, changing passwords and making sure we don't fall into phishing traps?
Yeah, great question. Look, at the end of the day, given my current job as a CISO nowadays, for me, it's all about protecting businesses, okay? Understanding the business, understanding a company's threat model, and making sure that, very simply, Markus, risks don't materialize. It's a very generic answer. I get it. Ultimately, cybersecurity is like a, I guess, constant battle between the good and the bad guys, isn't it? Right? Let's, by the way, see how AI maybe changes that a little bit. But ultimately, cybersecurity to me is, like cat and mouse game, I guess you could say, between the good guys and the bad guys. I mean, threat landscape changed, I think, quite a bit. Attacks are becoming more targeted. There's more money behind everything. There's a higher incentive overall to, break into companies, extort management and so forth. And so, from my today's standpoint, cybersecurity is all about protecting businesses as best as we can.
But if I can kind of elaborate on this, or you can elaborate a little bit on this, is that something that, is merely located in the IT department? Is that all I have to do? Because, I as an entrepreneur, do I actually have touch points with cybersecurity? Shouldn't I just call my CIO, CTO and say like, hey, call Christian, make sure our company is safe? Like, why is that topic somehow relevant for entrepreneurs?
No, look, the risks are different, whether we talk about, let's say, an e-commerce company in Berlin selling shoes, okay, versus Elon Musk running Twitter. Now, both may have a sort of similar tech stack, maybe cloud-based, and there are cloud-specific threats that, both security teams kind of need to tackle from inside the company. But again, the threat model is different, and it goes far beyond just tech. I mean, again, we'll probably dive into this later on, because AI really is giving or pushing sort of phishing to a whole nother level. But phishing, for example, has really nothing to do with tech departments or cloud security or application security or infrastructure layers, right? Phishing, as an example, targets anyone, I lost count how many times I saw this, that, for example, HR departments or marketing departments are targeted by phishing for the purpose of credential theft and so on, with an intent, Markus, to maybe, change the bank account details that I entered into SAP for you yourself, and then, your next paycheck goes to, somebody else's bank account. This, also what the audience thinks when I give these examples, but this actually happens all the time. I can give you so many examples of successful phishing attempts with different objectives. Happens all the time.
Yeah, that would have been that would have been actually my question. Like, so we always hear about that, but do people really click on that? Do they really fall for these phishing attacks, or is it is it so well made that if you don't have a special education around this, or you're not trained around this, that you actually would fall for this? Have people been have these attacks been made so much better in the last couple of years? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, like for sure. I think AI is giving it a new touch, but even without AI, look, phishing attacks against especially an unaware organization are pretty easy to conduct, because the truth of the matter is that people are not typically very well prepared, and they don't, check their email security headers, and so if it looks legit, people typically execute on things. And so, yeah, look, in answer to your question, Robert, all the time, for sure.
One more question. Can you kind of name in terms of the size of attacks, or the cost of attacks, like average cost of attacks? Are we talking about $10,000? Are we talking about $1 million on an attack? Can you give numbers on kind of the effect of these attacks?
Yeah, I didn't bring these numbers in for today. I'm sure there's papers out there that we can look up, because there's, research companies that, evaluate these kinds of things. But it's insane these days, especially the kinds of extortion attempts, Markus, that you can run against companies. Like, if you really breach a company, okay, that has a big position in the market, is making a lot of money. So if the adversary sees that there's really something to extort, and if he has leverage, he or she, let's be here correct, then they will run these campaigns, okay? They will steal data, they will threaten to publish it, or in the context of ransomware, which I'm sure that everyone is aware of, that's a top attack these days, okay? It's carried all the time, and the ransoms go up into the, I don't know how many digits, it's like insane, multi-millions. It really depends on the business context, right?
Are companies and CEOs aware of this threat, or is everybody thinking, it will not happen to me?
I think this has really changed over the last easily 10 years, but probably beyond. But, I've been really on the defense side. I moved personally to Berlin in 2012, and I know Markus is from the similar ecosystem, so he knows the industry pretty well. And if I just look at that time frame, I think from a CEO standpoint, really a lot has changed. Like, the awareness has definitely increased. Startups are being founded with, I guess you can say, security in mind. So companies hire security teams, or at least like one security guy, typically from the outset, or they work with some external company like ours to, understand the threat model for the health tech that they are building, or for the marketing tech that they are building, right? And they want to know where to invest, and where to invest in an intelligent way from the beginning, to at least bring in a layer of hygiene. So yeah, I think this level of awareness, Robert, really has changed for the better over the last couple of years, mmany years, I should say.
Across the entire company?
Probably. I mean, you asked from an exec team's perspective, that's for sure. Probably also in because look, unless this is sort of your first job, the chances are that you have previously worked in a company where there was a security team. And so the chances are, no matter whether you're a product manager or an engineer or anybody else, the chances are you have interfaced with a security team before and know a little bit about, what's going on in their mind and what their objectives are.
Well, looking at the objectives, what is it where these criminals are going after? Is it information? Is it espionage? Ransom?
So,
all of it?
Yeah.
Is there a common denominator?
Yeah, I would say there is. Look, it depends a bit whether we're talking sort of nation state and public sector versus private sector. That certainly makes a difference, right? But if we kind of focus this a little bit on the private sector, certainly information theft with an intention of extorting management teams, right? Asking for a ransom, and also ransomware type attacks where, just for the audience who maybe is not so familiar, where, they basically breach your infrastructure, they encrypt things, anticipating that you don't have backups, right? And then they withhold the keys until a point where you basically send them X amount of Bitcoins, right? This is extremely common. Extremely common. Like, it happens because it makes so much sense. Maybe you don't know this, and maybe the audience doesn't know it, but I did touch on it in the beginning. It is many-fold easier to break into tech companies than it is to protect them from the inside. It has to do with a very large attack surface, digital, technical sort of footprint that companies have. There's sort of many entry points that attackers can find nowadays, and bottom line is they only need to find one. Defenders, they need to protect all of them. And so that's a bit of an asymmetry, right? And yeah, as soon as you find one entry point, you could typically leverage that as an attacker. Let's put it this way.
I think that's a very interesting point you just made, right? An attacker just needs to find one point, while, from the inside, you need to protect all the doors. And I think that's quite interesting, especially what you said earlier, that security is more on top of mind with people. But I think I'm looking at Robert. Would you think that we all as entrepreneurs have that on top of our minds already? I would doubt that, to be honest. Let's ask the audience. Give us a comment, audience, whether you actually have security on top of mind, and if so, why not? But especially, sorry, yeah?
Yeah, so I've been working with the pharmaceutical industry quite extensively, and of course, security is a big issue there. So we are aware of it, but it's not in our daily practice. We train people on this, how to work with personal identifiable data and all others. So also simple things. Where do you store your keys, and how do you know people are entering the building? Who do you know who's entering the building? Very simple, traditional things that nothing got to do with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. When I first started my jobs here, a very prominent company builder here in Berlin. We started quite a few companies. All the doors were always open, and all the notebooks were just standing there overnight. And one morning, all 20 notebooks were stolen. And it was the entire source code of this company was on, these notebooks, because nobody took care of this. That was 10 years ago. I was just crazy at what has happened. And now we're actually entering the new era of AI, and we see what's actually being achieved with the help of AI, all these complex tasks. So I'm actually wondering how, and if so, how AI is changing cyber attacks. What's your takes on this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and let's unpack that in a moment. I just had maybe one more thought with regard to something that you said a moment ago. Yeah, you kind of asked the question: is cybersecurity business relevant, or on what sort of a level should it be discussed? And I kind of want to ask the question back to you, like if I'm, and keep in mind I'm the defender, right? But if I play the attacker here for a second, if I tell you that I can stop your revenue generating processes, okay, because you have some sort of tech company, tech enabled businesses, some sort of SaaS company, anything of the sort, and I tell you I can stop those revenue generating processes, well, should you be discussing this sort of threat landscape on an exec level, or would you say no, we can probably defer that down in quotes, yeah, but to the IT department? No, I'm pretty sure, Markus, you want to be very much aware. I think that totally is the CISO's responsibility to articulate these threats in a way that everyone finds them tangible, and present a clear roadmap on how to address all of that stuff. Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to briefly comment on this.
It should be on the agenda of every CEO in the board, all the way down to the youngest employee.
But that's a great discussion we're starting here. But like, what is the role that a company needs? Is it the role of a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer, that you need for this kind of task, or how do you make sure that? And I think that's why we're playing a little bit dumb, right, in terms of the security game. But sometimes I also believe that if you have technical people talking to business people, how do you convey the message, the impact, the threats that actually are there? Is there a certain role? Is it the CISO that translates that to the entrepreneurs running the company, or how do you see that?
Yeah, 100%. Look, but there's a difference between, you mentioned a good term there, which was impact. There's a key difference between communicating a vulnerability, something technical, okay, to an exec team, versus articulating impact, a threat scenario, and what's behind it, and putting likelihood for this to materialize into context and so on. And so when you're asking who or what does it take, look, yeah, for sure, it's a CISO, but really what you need is like a chief sort of technical risk understander. I know that's a made-up term, but you need somebody who understands technical risk, and most importantly, Markus, you need somebody who can, you need a chief communicator, okay, who can understand the business context and just brings the two worlds together. This may sound, I don't know, trivial to you and to those who are listening, but I can tell you, no disrespect to my peers, but the general CISO folks, they're not at that level.
No, I totally get that. I totally believe it's the same in my field. I'm also like working in marketing, and then it's also around like new metrics of customer retention and really making sure that the impact of what we're doing is understood on a C level, and that's not trivial. And I believe really, if I look at certain companies, I would say that I still see a significant number of companies who do not have a good communicator in terms of what's going on. And they see it really, as a task of the IT department to fend that off. So I think it's a great first core message that we have here is for us entrepreneurs, do we actually have the security communicator which translates threats into potential impacts, and to make sure that C-level really understands that. But coming back to my question now, that we know that we need this CISO and security should be on top of mind. Now we have this accelerator of AI coming into this into the business world. And is AI also playing the role of a catalyst in security, or rather not?
Yeah, look, great question. I think let's unpack the term AI security here for a second, because I don't want people to kind of mix this up, because there are so many terms like prompt injection and so forth floating around, right? Or training data manipulation is another one that I recently came across in prep for this conversation. Look, I think we broadly have to distinguish between, say, enterprise security risks, meaning what's relevant for entrepreneurs and execs running companies and so on, right? And then the security of, AI products or LLMs, maybe in particular AI applications, I'll just call them, okay? Because we can't mix it up. Like the set of enterprise security risks caused by this rise of AI is different from, these concepts around like jailbreaking, ChatGPT and so forth. So first of all, we have these two scopes. So anything, let's say prompt injection, training data manipulation, model theft, maybe some people have heard of, right? That's all like LLM security, AI product security. And then maybe when you came across terms like, deep fakes, I think, Markus, you mentioned in your introduction, right? And these advanced phishing attacks, or, code that may be generated by AI for developers and so on. These kinds of things, to me, they are all sort of enterprise risks. And I just want to make sure that I set these scopes here initially, right? That makes sense? Yep. And then if you ask me kind of, I guess there's many ways to skin this cat, but what AI means for like security in general and enterprise in particular, look, I want people to take away that AI is not going to hack anybody, okay? Just because we now have ChatGPT and other LLMs, etc. These things are not going to automatically, break in. It's the people that work with AI, okay? It is someone using AI that is potentially a threat. Yeah, but I think it's also very important to point out AI is only going to accelerate. It's sort of a force multiplier, I guess you could say, for both attack and defense. And we can dive into each depending on what your questions are, right? But again, high level, AI is certainly helping the bad guys to break in at scale more quickly, enumerate a company's attack surface, find entry points, exploit vulnerabilities, etc. But at the same time, it's also a force multiplier for the defensive teams inside of organizations, okay, when it comes to, detecting these kinds of attacks and ultimately shutting them down, okay?
That's actually interesting. What makes detecting attacks so difficult? That you need like an AI to help you detect, let's say, a break-in, or is it about finding the security holes? Where do you use AI in defense? Is it because the attacks have become so complicated in terms of little traces that they leave, or correlations between data, or what's the point behind?
Yeah, all of the above. Like correlation certainly plays into it, but I would start at a very simple problem, and it's been around for decades, which is just signal to noise, okay? Security teams, defensive teams, blue teams, as we sometimes call them, they've been dealing with this for ages. They have so much data, and they can't really figure out, like, they can't really cut through the noise, okay? They collect, audit trails and, been pushing data into SIMs for ages and so on. But how do we really, like I said, cut down to what is actually important and make sure that we are being alerted of, like, what we actually should be spending our human time on investigating, okay? It's already difficult in smaller organizations. It's certainly extremely difficult in large companies. And I'm not even saying the size of, Tesla or anything like that. I'm just saying, I don't know, as soon as you have more than 100 employees and a product behind it, it gets difficult. So anyways, in answer to your question, Markus, it's a big data problem. AI helps in identifying what matters and also correlation in all kinds of ways. So you see AI being built into various defense products. Just to name one example, I mean, the audience can look it up, Microsoft's Security Copilot, for example. Really what that is just a chatbot that helps blue teams dive into exactly what I just explained. That's a good example, I think.
Okay, super interesting. So at the end of the day, it's a little bit like detecting a cat or a mouse. I have to have, there's a lot of input data coming in there. It varies. A cat doesn't always look the same, and it's the same a little bit about an attack. And basically just the input data is a little bit of a different one, but you do a classification here. There's a high risk that this data is actually belonging to an attack. It's basically kind of this application of pattern finding.
Yeah, and also is something like a true positive, something that matters, an actual breach, something that I should actually worry about or at least investigate or forward to somebody? Or can I just rule it out as a false positive or something like that, okay? Just this simple, telling these two kind of scenarios apart. It's been bugging security teams for decades, and AI really helps in this. I think it's probably like an order of magnitude or a couple in difference.
Yeah, false negatives would be a really bad thing, right? In this case, to really eliminate them. But that's interesting. So AI is also a productivity booster for the blue teams, for the security teams, in order to detect potential breaches, and to make sure that we as entrepreneurs don't hire like an entire, a football team of security people who can actually be very efficient with the number of people that we already have in the security team.
Yeah, exactly. I hope that will be the case, because those, completely oversized, overstaffed security teams with most people kind of wasting their time and having no traction, it's not something I've been liking over the last years.
Super interesting. But and Robert, that's actually even more your topic in terms of attacking AI and falsifying data and stuff. You know a lot more about this, but I still would like to dive a little bit into attacking AI, just a little bit briefly. Do you see actually, and Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, but do you see chances that these big public language models, and there are more and more open source models as well, which you can just get and use, that they are subject to these attacks, that they are trained a little bit differently for certain questions. And if it's just, as you said, code generation, right? You just sneak in kind of a line that gives you like a little hole into in your IT security or in your code, right? You can inject something special, something like this. Do you think it's a realistic scenario?
This go to Robert, or are you asking the question to me?
I'm actually asking the question to you. I just would like to encourage Robert to further specify in terms. I really did nail it.
No, I think so. What I've read and what I've seen is tapping into codes and tapping into data. It's a different ball game than using generative AI for impersonating and doing identity thefts. And I don't know how often it happens. I know that the impacts can be tremendous. And the basic question that I have basically is how do I prevent it? So it's basically on a data level, but also on a management level. How can I prevent becoming a victim from an AI security breach?
Oh man, that is a very good question, a very broad question at the same time. Because I mean, what is an AI security breach? I mean, we discussed this a bit before. There's different levels to this. You will find AI-powered attacks, attacking sort of human behavior and systems and applications at the same time. So I kind of see these two different scopes, I think for the adversaries, AI helps conducting phishing, like way more at scale as in the past. Now, the defensive side is exactly the same, You just educate your people. There's technical things you can deploy to detect. Basically, there's AI tooling you can deploy to detect AI-based phishing. So that's the cat and mouse game that we talked about before, right? But my whole point is this will happen at scale, And I think that's a key difference. And then when it comes to AI-powered exploitations of systems and applications, think customer-facing applications where if you break into them, it really has an impact on revenue and so on. Same thing. To every tool that is now given to the attackers, there is something in the defense tool ecosystem. The audience can look up, industry abbreviations that are thrown around by Gartner and other institutions. I don't want to bore you with the types of security tooling that's out there. There's a lot, but we need to figure out the right responses.
Because I think if an airline is being attacked by an AI-powered hacker group, for instance, on their pricing models, and the effect can be tremendous, bottom line and top line.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to give you one pointer, like for example, there's sort of new tooling coming up, AI-powered defense tooling around API security. And Robert, I understand your example with the airline, but an airline is using just as many APIs as a health tech company situated somewhere in Berlin. And so the challenge around protecting APIs at scale using AI technology is exactly the same, whether we talk Lufthansa or whoever else, And so, the blue teams, the defensive teams just need to kind of stack up their game there a little bit.
So one thing to tackle this problem is education of every member in the business, from top level to all the way to the security officer and youngest staff member, right?
Yeah, like when we think about phishing, and just to remind you, the number one objective behind phishing campaigns is typically credential theft. So what these guys are trying to do is they kind of lure you into revealing username password combinations, and then keep this in mind. Educating people on telling phishing apart from, legitimate email communication is one thing, and I'm totally saying we should do that, right? But then also deploying additional tooling to make sure that we have, 2FA, two-factor authentication, MFA as we call it, coverage or detecting credential misuse. Like think, Markus typically is working from a Mac and he's using his credentials typically from a Mac, but then all of a sudden somebody attempts authenticating using Markus's username password combinations from a different type of device. That's really where AI technology helps tell these things apart, tell apart signal from noise. And that's kind of how we can protect ourselves on top of, Robert, just education.
Is there a specific role for policymakers also in this field? Do policymakers have a specific role in this? Do we need new regulations?
That's a great question. Markus, what do you think about that?
I am generally not a big fan of a lot of regulations, to be honest. And the question I ask myself is, how shall we regulate attackers? I think we need to have all the opportunities to leverage AI in terms of on the defensive side of the game. I think we shouldn't have any limitations to be able to defend ourselves for attacks. But at the end of the game, you said it, Christian, it's a cat and mouse game. So if I'm not able to really fully leverage the opportunities of AI in the defense game, I cannot fight off the attackers. And that's why my belief is that currently, at least in the field of security, the AI and security, I don't think we need new regulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. It kind of makes me think of challenges and opportunities in this field, right?
That was my next question.
Next question.
What are the future challenges and questions and opportunities that we have?
Great question, Robert.
Thank you.
It really makes me wonder also, who's going to win. I don't know. It's sort of an interesting thought experiment. Who will win this? Is there going to be a winner between attack and defense?
There's truly an arms race.
There's an arms race, that's for sure, right? I think, look, to be clear, in the past, we've had a huge asymmetry. It has always been much easier for attackers to break in than it is for defenders to protect themselves. I believe I made this point now 2 or 3 times. Typically, attackers jump onto, they weaponize more efficiently and effectively. So I think at the moment, this rise of AI is really not helping the defenders because AI makes it just so much easier again to break in. But we also see a lot of more security products being built and VCs investing into entrepreneurs building defense technology. And so I think there's a lot of catching up to do. I don't know who will win. There's examples for both sides. It's an arms race. So to be honest, I don't know.
That's a lot of information for me as an entrepreneur. I know that there is this threat. I have understood that the attackers are leveraging AI, and they will be using AI more in order to have more clever and more intense attacks. But what about the other? What about us entrepreneurs tomorrow morning when we go into the office? What are the 1 or 2 things that I should take away from this conversation that we had, and what we need to do tomorrow morning when we come to the office? Do you have any suggestions for us?
Yeah, another great question. Look, I would say, first of all, put AI to the side for the moment. Forget about AI when you come to the office tomorrow, when you think about security. I think we can come back to it, but what I'm saying is this. So if the acid test for cybersecurity is kind of to ask yourself, if I was targeted, okay, then, well, first of all, do I have a good and solid understanding of my security posture as CEO? That's what I would ask myself. But then secondly, if I was targeted, do I have trust that my team could, probably easily detect and respond to such an attack? Right? Do I have trust in that? I think that's sort of the acid test that I should ask myself. And then if the answer is no, then I should, probably take it from there and, work with professionals to support me. And then if the answer is yes, then, I would, approach my security team or my tech team, whoever is in charge of the topic, maybe it's infrastructure, How clear is our roadmap? How concise is our roadmap? Are we aware of what we need to work on? Have we set the right priorities? Or are we just working from one ad hoc initiative to the next and are, if we are truthful to ourselves, being a bit unstructured? Okay, so that's what I would ask myself.
Markus, any closing words?
I will just forward every email that I'm getting to the security team now in order to minimize the false negatives. So I'll probably have to hire or engage Christian or some AI. But I would love to continue this discussion for a long time and also cover things like, attacking LLMs. I think that what we've seen is that the topic is so broad, it's relevant to all of us entrepreneurs. And AI is just making this game even faster. And I think that's also what your last words showed and depicted quite nicely, that we already now have a security issue. If not, we should at least have a good focus on top of this. And I believe that this conversation was super valuable also in terms of looking at the role of the CISO or the communicator. I think that was something I also really are taking with me. Think about this tonight. So what's left to me is really say thanks, Christian, and we should continue this discussion.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
I totally agree with you, Markus. I think this discussion is far from finished. Guys, thank you. I would like to thank you all for sharing your insights. And if you would like to listen to more podcasts on AI and entrepreneurship, go to the EO Media House podcast, wherever you get your podcast. My name is Robert van der Zwart, and until next time, goodbye.